Hello everyone. This talk is Evolution After Prosecution, Psychedelic APT41. We will talk about APT41's operation in the past year. We are Team T5 from Taiwan. I'm Aragorn, also a malware researcher. There are 3 other speakers in this talk. Charles is the Chief Analyst and CTO in Team T5. Peter and Tom are the security engineer. They are good at incident response. Our talk is divided into 6 parts, including initial access, CobbleStrike loader, APT41's backdoor, C2 hiding technique, relation to other operations, and takeaway. The content of APT41 in this talk is mainly from September 2020 to August 2021. We won't cover the operation before then. The target countries of APT41 are distributed all over the world, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. We have also observed some attacks in Europe and the United States. As for China, we will talk about it in the next chapter. The target industries are also very diverse, ranging from healthcare, high-tech to major national infrastructures. After being sued by FBI last year, APT41 began to use many new attack techniques. We will introduce them one by one in the following chapters. In initial access, we have observed that they use string-line mail in recent attacks. In many IR incidents, we found that they may not use the latest vulnerabilities to attack. They just use some SQL or some web vulnerabilities to get into the target. They also continue to use some phishing methods, such as using fake flash installers or phishing emails. Like the decoy document on the right, they use COVID-19 related thing to make a decoy which was targeted a telecom company in Hong Kong. We are going to talk about CobbleStrike loader in this part. In the past year, we saw that APT41 heavily used CobbleStrike in their operation, and they also keep evolving their technique to disseminate CobbleStrike and use some techniques to avoid tracing back to the real C2 IP address. At the beginning, they started to use a loader that used the SHA-20 algorithm to encrypt and decrypt the CobbleStrike. They started to use CDN service and Cloudflare Worker on their C2 infrastructure since November 2020. And we found they used the howling technique and certificate bypass in chat loader in March this year. And they started to use .NET loader and misused InstallUtil in April 2021. They started to use funny switch loader to load CobbleStrike and use early code bird injection technique in loader since June. The name of the chat loader is from the SHA-20 algorithm it used to decrypt the payload. The loader will load CobbleStrike or other backdoor. Chat loader also have some characteristics among different versions, like ETW bypass, DL howling, and certificate bypass. Below is the config structure before decrypting by SHA-20. There are nonce, CRC32, length of encryption config, ciphertext, and the encryption key. We have now seen 2 config structures, which can be identified by their header, respectively. The config on the left has more options for the DL howling. Here is an example of the config structure before and after decryption of the chat loader. This is a schematic diagram of DL hauling. The loader will first create a process, Tseng host, and read the certificate bypassed payload, and then find a suitable DL file in System32 folder starting with alphabet A, which size of the text section can be inserted by the payload. In this example, the file selected by the loader is aaclient.dll. So the loader will load aaclient.dll as a module into Tseng host process, and then inject the payload into the text section of aaclient.dll. Judging from the code in chat loader, we speculate that they should modify with forest POC code on the GitHub, because there are a lot of similarities. If we use process hacker to look at the injected process, we can see that the text section of aaclient.dll is RWX. In the above case, they also use another technique, certificate bypass, which is abuse of MS13-098 to allow them to hide its payload in the PE file signature section. We found the payload file libegl.dll has a valid signature, and it has set Win certificate structure and security direct abnormally large to hide its malicious payload. We can also understand this attack method from the picture below. On the left is a normal Nobita, which was a cartoon character and has a valid certificate. And the right Nobita also has a valid certificate, but he has grown taller, and maybe he was inserted by some shellcode. Because he has a valid certificate, so we may consider he also a valid Nobita if we are careless. Since chat loader and its variants can be detected by most security products, we found that they began to use .NET Loader instead. In some environments with insufficient protection, we have seen some simple .NET Loader. In some environments with sufficient protection, we observe that they use InstallUtil to legally bring up their .NET Loader, and the .NET Loader is relatively more complicated. InstallUtil is a legitimate installer tool, which is a command line utility that allows you to install and uninstall server resources by executing the installer components in specified assemblies. This tool works in conjunction with classes in the system configuration install namespace. The console utility InstallUtil runs a malicious .NET assembly by passing the entry point of the assembly. All malicious activity is then hidden in the context of the trusted process. The .NET Loader's main purpose is to decode the payload and do the process hollowing to inject the payload, like CobbleStrike or other backdoor. The .NET Loader uses SHA-256 to generate AES key, then use MD5 to generate AES IV, and then use AES ECB mode to decrypt the payload and config. After decryption the payload and config, it will use the process hollowing technique to inject the payload. And we have seen two versions of the .NET Loader, and the tables are their config before and after the decryption. APT41 also performed a large-scale scanning on the Catfish server all over the world this year, and they used the vulnerable server as C2 server. Some of the CobbleStrike loader in this operation will have the PDB string fish master, and some of have Biden happy in their strings. In this operation, there are mainly two ways to decrypt the payload. The first one is to use XOR with the hardcode key, and the other is to use UID shellcode and execute it through the code-based function. We have also observed that they will use the loader of funny switch to distribute the combo strike. The name of funny switch is mentioned in the PT security report. Recently, we have speculated that such loader may be attacking McAfee users from the file name and from the PDB string, because the PDB string here is McAfee. Yeah, he pronounced like McAfee. And recently, we have also observed a new loader, which is modified from an open source Aragorn loader, which directly uses code to execute the payload. And there are also many versions of this loader. In these versions, there are some different features, such as using RC4 to decode the payload from the resource picture, or using Detour, one of Microsoft's library, to hook the free library of the launcher, and or using early bird code injection technique to bypass some EDR detection. And finishing the combo strike loader, in next section, we will talk about some APT41's backdoor. APT41 still using some old backdoor like High Noon, Shadowpay, and plugins during 2020 to 2021, but also using some new backdoor like RBRAT or network or spider. The first backdoor we want to introduce is error root. The error root is a listen port backdoor, and we found a new version in 2021. It has a PDB string js.pdb. And we first saw error root is in 2019. It doesn't have much documentation before. Error root use HTTP API to create an HTTP server and then add this URL to the URL group of the server to enable the server to open port 80. And the plus is a strong wildcard, which means that the server will process all domains or IPs connecting to this host. If the format of packet which connecting to the error root is wrong, the server will send a unique error message like this. So we call this backdoor error root. And this backdoor can just use curl to send the instruction. And this is the example of the curl command. And this is the command of error root. We found a new RAT used by APT41 last year, since there is a prefix RB in some functions, like this. So we named it RBRAT. And it is different from RBDoor, which was also used by APT41, but have some relations we will talk about later. And it will show the versions on its mutex, like Google Updater 1.0.1. And it will use WinDivert for port reuse in version 1.0.2. WinDivert has been added to their import table. As for 1.0.1 version, though we did not find such feature, however, we did observe WinDivert on that infected host. Before executing the backdoor function, it will first add some firewall rules for WinDivert. RBRAT also has the MACD number for packet like RBDoor, but different from the MACD number before. The MACD number in RBRAT we have seen is this and this, but the backdoor in this GitHub give us is this. They are different. And in the shell command of the RBRAT, we saw some similarities with another open source tool, encrypt. So we speculate that maybe revised from them. And here is another new backdoor we called network. It was dropped by Chat Loader, and it was a shellcode-based backdoor. It was first seen in March 2021 and first seen on VirusTotal in July 2021. Network dynamically resolves the imports in a function with almost 150 if calls. It creates a table of the Windows API and uses register plus offset to call the API function to make the analysis more complex. This technique has also used by Crosswalk. After dynamically resolving the API, it will first check if all user profile utxp.nat directory exists. If not, it will create that directory. If the directory exists, it will try to read some file in that directory and use MD5 and charger20 to decode it. So we name the backdoor network from the payload path NAT. There are two transport protocols for network. The first is raw TCP socket, you can see in this picture, and the other is HTTPS. In the post request to C2 server, there are two elements in the header. GTX-ID was generated by crypto_gen_random, and GTU-VID was generated by crypto_gen_random and MD5 operation. They are different in every request. And the message between C2 server are encrypted by charger20 and MD5. In the CNC command handler, network creates a message queue using the pick message WAPI. After receiving the message will also decoded by MD5 and charger20 and passed to the command handler. And we have found some connection between network and the crosswalk. The first one is they are both use register plus offset to call the Windows API in the shellcode. And the second is their first command code are both 0x64. But the commands are very different. And there is another similarity between network and crosswalk, which we have some top domain strings like Microsoft and Google.com. On the right is the command of network. We don't know all the command yet. If anyone knows the unknown command, please share with us. We have found a new loader that will inject backdoor, a new version of high-noon rate, into memory. The loader has two versions. The main difference is the decryption algorithm. One will use DPAPI to decrypt payload, and another use AES. And the WinDiver.dll was also embedded in the backdoor 64.dll. The WinDiver.dll can capture packets on listening port via WinDiver.sys in the kernel mode. You can see that starbot string in both versions. We think that call the new version of High Noon as backdoor. The loader which uses DPAPI technique has a PDB string, middle64.pdb. The new version of High Noon will choose the kernel driver according to the DW minor version of Windows. If it is more than 2, it will choose WinDivert. The command of High Noon is still same as the version mentioned by Mechanica in 2018. It has 5 commands. In 2021, APT41 still using funny switch, which was a backdoor written in .NET and have mentioned in PT Security's report. It will first decode stage 1 shellcode in memory, and the first stage 1 shellcode will use XOR to decrypt stage 2 shellcode and funny deal in memory. The main purpose of stage 2 shellcode is to run the .NET PE in the memory. After the funny deal was running in the memory, it will decrypt the config and a JS module for the command. And here is the example of the configuration of funny deal. In 2020, the config of funny deal is plain text in the loader, but in 2021, the config was encrypted and will decrypt by funny.core.run in funny deal function, which use AES and base64 to decode. And the command protocol and JS module are same as 2020 version. And starting from 2020, the shadow page used by APT41 is a new builder. This builder was also mentioned in the PT Security's report, which used new obfuscation and decryption methods. But we think this builder should be a shell tool, because we have also seen the Nikon team use this builder too. This is the ND5 hash of that builder used by Nikon team. The following code is the method to decrypt the string of the configuration in the new builder. And here is the example of the config of the new builder of the shadow page. And this part, we are going to talk about some C2 hiding technique used by APT41. We have seen that APT41 tried to use Cloudflare CDN or other CDN service for CobbleStrike a lot since November 2020. In HTTPS beacon, they directly use CDN service, like the domain here, microgoogle.ml. The resolved IP are all CDN IP. And in DNS beacon, we can usually use NS-Raker to trace back the real C2 IP. But in some cases, we can repeat the method. For example, like this domain, ns.cloud01.tk, which used in 2021 was plugged in at 8.8.8.8. But we can use the NS-Raker to trace back and find the real C2 IP here. But in some cases, like the DNS beacon ns1.hksearch.com, it didn't have any resolved IP and also didn't have any NS-Raker. So we can use the same way to trace back the real C2 IP address. Another interesting thing is that we found that they usually park their C2 domain on some specific IP like 8.8.8.251. And since January 2020, we have seen they use Cloudflare Workers as a redirector to hide the real C2 IP. Therefore, it can only see the connection with the Cloudflare IP in the victim host, which not only causes difficulties in tracing but also adds some difficulties to blocking. In addition to CobbleStrike, other backdoor C2 have also been used with such technique. For example, this C2 domain was used by network. We can just get the Cloudflare IP from this C2 domain. And the last part, we are going to talk about some relation operation to APT41. At the beginning, Fishmaster, also called TAG22 by Recorded Future, their Fishmaster loader and C2 could not be directly connected to APT41 first, but we have seen some correlation in recent samples. The starting point is that the funny switch and shadow page sample we found. The PDB string of the funny switch allow us to connect to another sample, which also a funny switch loader, but the payload is CobbleStrike. And the C2 of this cobalt strike can be directly connected to another fishmaster sample. And the cobalt strike load by the cobalt strike load by funny switch has a specific XOR key for the configuration. It's 0x38. And from this specific payload, we can connect with another cobalt strike payload. And this cobalt strike payload C2 is this. And with this IP, we can connect to another fishmaster sample. And the C2 of the sample we found in the IR case is also related to the fishmaster sample. The subdomain of the C2 are all wikimedia.vip. So these clues make us believe the fishmaster operation is done by APT41. And in the beginning of 2020, we discovered that Cobalt Strike and High Noon appear together into our IR cases. One of C2 is this domain, and another C2 is this domain. And the two C2 domain both resolve to this IP, 66. And then from this IP certificate, we can link to another 4 IPs, also have Cobalt Strike C2 domain resolution records. And one of these IP, 149, its paste DNA 6-man this domain, also mentioned in RiskIQ's report, which they said it may have some connection to Goblin Panda. And one of the paste DNS of the C2 domain, the IP 45.76, can relate to another domain, chalkmywire.org. And this domain had been used in an RTF sample security audit template final.doc during 2019. And the sample was mentioned in Recorded Futures report this June. It will drop the PC share backdoor. The attribution of this PC share sample was not too clear. We just can speculate the sample belongs to Chinese APT. And there were the possibilities that this IP 149 have changed the ownership to APT41 after March 2020, because the APT41's operation is after 2020 March. And this operation didn't have any connection to APT41. Yes, maybe there are these possibilities. And HW operation is Chinese government plan to detect the security issues of key national infrastructure and to test their event monitoring and ability to quickly coordinate with the emergency incident. The target involves many industries, including government, finance, electricity, and business key enterprises. From Austin Info, the operation started from April 8, 2021. And there are some samples here. We have medium confidence that they were used for the HW operation. And the upload time and file content of this sample are almost in the middle of April this year, and coincident with the time of the starting date of HW operation. Here are some clues we found. The first one is that the Cobalt Strike loader we found in the IR case, which was modified with Alaris and decrypt the PNG as payload from the resource. In mid-April, there was a SAM loader uploaded from China. The second is that we found a sample that was also uploaded from China, which the function to calculate API hash is sent as funny switch. And this function has not been found on other samples. The third is the Cobalt Strike loader that we saw in another IR case, which used early barcode injection. From the header of the Cobalt Strike payload, we can connect to other samples which was also uploaded from China. There are two possibilities here. The first possibility is that these samples are used in the HW operation, and APT41 was also involved. The second possibility is that these samples are used in real attacks. In the past, we have also observed that APT41 had attacked internal units in China. We do not have a high confidence in the relation for HW operation. We just put forward our observations. If others have different views, welcome to share with us. In Fishmaster's operation, we saw that they had stolen and used the certificate of Taiwan and South Korean game companies. In addition, we observed that the other 3 certificates which have medium confidence that may be related to APT41, but we have not found the actual evidence to prove it yet. These 3 certificates are related to various CobbleStrike samples which also use CDN service and also use fake flash installer to drop CobbleStrike. And here's our takeaway. We found various kind of CobbleStrike loader and found some new TTP for the APT41. And we also found some new backdoor and some new characteristic for the old backdoor. And we also talk about some C2 hiding techniques used by APT41. And we also give everyone some observation from the APT41 to relation to the operations, other operations. And here is our IOC for the loader and the backdoor. And here is our IOC for the C2 domain and some IP. And this is our reference. And thank you everyone.